Hey BookTube, welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and it's time for a book tag. So, I'm going to do the 20 questions book tag, and let me put these down before they fall out of my hands. I'm going to do the 20 questions book tag, and I will post a link to the original creator of this tag below. So, here are the questions. Question number 1: how many books is too many books in a book series? Okay, so my answer is 20 or more books, but I feel like I want to elaborate on this. So I feel like a series can get old if the author just keeps going and going and writing more books. And sometimes for me, why that might bother me if an author just keeps writing more books is if I'm no longer enjoying the series. Like, I'm getting tired of, like, that is what happened with House of Night. I got tired of that series, I get frustrated with that series, and I get annoyed by it, and, I just got tired. It got to the point where I would think, oh, yes, that's a good ending, it's finally over, but then it would say on, like, coming soon, or, book number blank, and I was just like, are you kidding me? And I couldn't, I feel like if an author has to have a stopping point. It has to have an ending point. And just at some, because then, like, good things do have to come to an end at some point. I know some people feel like, oh no, it doesn't have to come to an end. I would love it no matter what. But I think, and for me personally, I think eventually it would get old after a while. So I do have a limit, but there are some series that I'm recently getting into that are going into teen number of books, like Robert Jordan series, the Wheel of Time series that has 14 books. So that's why I said 20, because I don't know how, like, if that one I'm still gonna love it. I mean, there is a period in the middle where I hear that it drags on a little bit, so hopefully that won't bother me. And I'm not gonna give up on it. I'm gonna keep going. But maybe I won't feel that way. Maybe I won't be. But I just feel like if an author just keeps going and going and doesn't look like it has a stopping point, I personally feel like it should have a stopping point. There should be an ending. There should be a set ending. Don't keep going, just, because then it takes away the magic and the emotions of the story if the author just keeps going and going and going and doesn't end it. It's the same thing with the whole killing off characters thing. If you are too afraid to kill off favorite beloved characters because everyone loves them, then you're not doing yourself right. Now, if there's a good reason, a necessary reason to keep that character alive, a good reason, not just because, oh, everyone loves it and loves that character, so we're going to keep him on there, Anna Minetti, then, there has to be a good reason, not an excuse, but a reason why, like, why that character is still alive. Like, I'm gonna bring this up. I didn't want to, for instance, originally when I was talking to Terry from Florida about this, I was saying, the whole Loki thing with Avengers and Loki and killing him off right away. But, thinking about it and reading other people's comments. Now, Terry, if you watch this, I still agree with what I said. If you remember what I said, I still think authors and screenwriters shouldn't be afraid to kill off characters like Loki. Just because he's so beloved does not mean they should be afraid to kill off characters. But with that being said, a lot of people made good points that he's not the type of character that, like, in the past two movies, his other movies, you think he's dead, but then it always turns out it's an illusion, that it's not real. He comes back. So it would make sense for his character to be, because I think he's a character that would be afraid to die anyway, and wouldn't want to, and at the end of the day couldn't bring himself to die for others as much as he loves his brother, his adopted brother. he would still get out of it, I think, now that I think about it. And then also, the way some people point out the way it happened was a little bit lame anyway. Either way, though, we know that, even if he really did, even if the writers didn't really mean to kill off this version of him, we know that another version the version from 2012 is still around. So, like I said, again, I repeat, I still believe what I told Terry when I talked to her, that they shouldn't be afraid to kill off characters, even if they're beloved. Because if it, it's, people die. There are ways to it's boring if you keep bringing them back after a while. But if there is a good reason and a good excuse and it makes sense for the character, then, and not just because, fans love this character so they have to keep him around. I'm just gonna go there and say Rumple. I love Rumple, and but I feel like at that point, after, I think the writer just kept him around because everyone loved him just a little bit more than Hook. I could be wrong. So if you're Wands fans, and you're watching my videos, I admit I could be wrong there. But in my personal opinion, I think he's just loved a little bit more than Hook. Just a little bit more. And I'm not talking just about looks, because everyone thinks Hook is so pretty, and Robert Carlyle's an older man, So, but it's not just about looks. It's about acting performance. And a character that's a little more, and I feel like a lot of people, when it came to Hook, it was all about, a lot of people were drawn to him because he was attractive, and he was the bad boy that was reformed, supposedly. But anyway, okay, I'm getting off topic. So let's get back to the book questions. So long story short, I'm okay with cliffhanger. I think it depends on how good the series is. If they're going to, and I do have a limit though. Okay, question number 2. I was about to answer question number 2 just now, but question number 2 is, how do you feel about cliffhangers? And again, it depends. I actually like cliffhangers. I don't mind them. But I have come to realize, though, when it comes to series, I need to wait until at least 2 or 3 books come out first, if the series is still ongoing, if the author's still working on the series, because then after a while I might, unless I just really absolutely in love with the series and I just absolutely love it and keep going with it, eventually I might move on from a series. Even if I really do enjoy it, sometimes I have to be like absolutely in love with that series to be like, I have to get I can wait for the next book. I think unconsciously that's why I haven't read Serpent and Dove or continue with Poppy War, because it's like I'm waiting. Now, with Poppy War, I could probably start reading it now, because, the next book with, the third book will be out in like a year or 2, I believe. So, and the second one's already out. It hasn't come out in paperback yet. But it's a very, with series with Leigh Bardugo's books, I enjoy them. I like them. I have a good time with them. And I'm one of the few people who loved King of Scars. But the second one hasn't come out, and I'm like, now I'm just not as intrigued by it. I still like it, but it's like, I'm not going to go to the store. I might delay picking it up. It's what's going on with the Cassandra Clare books. I've started to move on from those, and yes, I'm still interested in the Dark Artifice series and all that, but all of a sudden I'm not as, I moved on, and, the only reason I want to read them is I do want to get back into them, and also I have a group on Facebook, so I feel like, I should keep going, either that or give my group to the other person who runs the group with me. So it's like, I want to get back, but I started reading Lady Midnight, it's like, I'm not feeling this. It's not the same. But yeah, with cliffhanger, if a book ends on a cliffhanger, then it will still drive me crazy. But I'm okay with I'm okay depending on how, depending on the situation. Okay, so finally on to question number 3, because I also took, when I first started filming this, I took a long time answering the first 2 questions too, because you guys know I ramble. Question number 3, paperback, definitely paperback. I appreciate the appeal of hardback because aesthetically it's a nice, and I try not to be like, oh, the dust jackets bother me, because I don't like taking off the dust jackets, because unless the book has the naked hardback as an image on it that you can actually see. But I do get why people are bothered by dust jackets, and I think I definitely prefer paperbacks. Although I like the cloth bound version, the cloth bound in editions of some of the classics. Unfortunately, I only have one, because then, they disappear really quickly on thrift books, because they're so nice. But yeah, paperbacks are easier to travel with, they cost less, and I don't have to worry about the dust jacket. Although paperbacks can be heavy too. Okay, so favorite book is... Okay, so I cannot pick one favorite. So the books I showed you that will hopefully show up in the thumbnail are all my favorites. Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky, which is about this student who is I don't know if it's before or during or the Russian Revolution. But I can't remember. He's broke and he's in a lot of debt, so he decides the way to solve his problem is to kill a female pawnbroker, and he starts to feel guilty and is paranoid that he's going to get caught, because he knows he murdered someone. So it's like, yeah, I know that's morally wrong, but it was the only solution I could come up with. It's really good, and it's very engaging. I really like the main character, Raskolnikov. He's a very compelling and sympathetic character, even though he was a murderer. I also said The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I know a lot of people not everybody loves, I feel like this is basically a polarizing book, because not everybody loves it. Not everybody loves stories that are about very pretentious characters. I'm just fascinated by people like that are, that are so arrogant, think they're so superior, and think they're so smart, and then you see them do really stupid shit. That proves that they're not that smart. Yes, they're academically smart, they're book smart, but they're, and maybe they see things that we mediocre people don't, but it's just so fascinating to and it's kind of amusing spending time with these characters and seeing them do stupid things and be arrogant and be so cocky, and then they get themselves in dumb situations. And it's also beautifully written, and I think it should be considered a classic. Like I said, I think it's a very polarizing book, but I think a lot of people... But I don't think just because a book is polarizing means it's going to be doesn't have a chance to be considered a classic. And, these kids are studying Greek. Hence the cover, which for the longest time I didn't understand this cover, but then looking at it, I realized, oh wait, that's the statue of David or whatever. Or, I think it's David. Maybe like the Thinker or something, one of those famous Greek statues that they have in like museums and stuff. Okay, and then I also said my first Fitzgerald book. I absolutely love it. It's still my favorite of his. I mean, unfortunately, I've only read one of his novels. One other novel by him, but I'm currently reading his short stories, and I love them. Some of them I love more than others so far. But The Great Gatsby, I love this. This is basically about... Oh, I didn't tell you what The Secret History is about. Okay, so this is basically this guy from New Hampshire goes to, or California. Actually, no, he's from California, and he decides to go upstate to New Hampshire to go to school. It's a very rich, prestigious school, and he wants to get into this class for a bunch of Greek scholars, but the teacher is very particular and very picky with the students he chooses. And somehow, though, he ends up in the class, and he becomes friends with these, but these are very snobby, arrogant people that think they're better than everybody else. They don't associate with the rest of the school. And they decide to murder one of their friends in the class. And it's all about the preparing, the before the murder, during the murder, before the murder and after the murder, and how they deal with it. And our main character is kind of caught in the middle of all that. And it's how he deals with it himself. Okay, so The Great Gatsby, back to The Great Gatsby. So this is a classic narrated by this guy named, I think his name is Nick, if I remember correctly. And he is a wannabe writer. And while he's visiting his cousin Daisy, he finds out from her friend Jordan about this mysterious guy across the lake where they live, who throws these lavish, amazing, extravagant parties, Mr. J. Gatsby, and somehow he gets invited, and Nick gets invited to Gatsby's party, and on accident he meets Gatsby and they become friends, and Gatsby helps him with his career and stuff, and he also finds out, though, that Gatsby has an ultimatum. He knows that Nick is friends with, is cousins to Daisy, and that Daisy and Gatsby have had a romantic history, and he's hoping that Nick will help him reunite with Daisy. Only problem is Daisy is married to a rich guy, a self-made rich guy, who's a kind of an asshole and is essentially cheating on her. So it's not a happy book, but provides an interesting commentary on the world, and I know a lot of Fitzgerald's, not all of his books, not all of them, but a lot of them are kind of bittersweet. At least what I'm glimpsing so far. They're just about life and how life doesn't always end up happy. It's not a fairy tale. It provides an interesting comedy about, comedy, I don't know why I say commentary on life and how, people trying to recapture the differences between, like, how your status in life is really important to people, can be very important in how it influences you and how it can affect your relationships. And how you can't always, recapture, you can try to, but you can't recapture the past. It's a very interesting story, and it's not that long of a book. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but I love it. It's one of my favorites. Okay, then I have Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. I've read this book 3 times now, and it is an answer for another question on one of these books questions. This is just a coming-of-age story about this young woman named Jane, and her parents die when she was really little. She's forced to live with her uncle and aunt, and her cousins, and her uncle, as really cares about her, but then he ends up dying, and her aunt and cousins don't really like her. They bully her, they treat her less than. She's kind of a Cinderella figure in their family. And then eventually her aunt sends her to Lowood School, which is a very religious school for girls, which is run poorly. She makes friends there. She does make a few friends there, but her one friend dies of typhus because the headmaster who runs the school is not very good at taking care of the school. And then eventually she ends up, when she turns 18 and in her own words, seeking a new situation, she ends up applying to be a governess and gets a job at Thornfield Hall and as the governess to Adele, the ward of Mr. Rochester. And if you're familiar with the story, you know what happens there. This is such a beautiful story. It's just a coming of age story, and Jane is such a strong young woman. It's all about her. It's about her and her life and her becoming who she is, and she's such a strong moral compass. And throughout the whole story, she stays true to herself, and though she struggles with it, especially when it comes to Rochester, she really, it's very difficult for her but she stays true to who she is, and she knows, she is a strong-minded young woman and has a strong opinion, but she also knows that she cannot cross a line. She has to be careful. And she knows I hate this phrase, but she knows her place, her role in life, in her status, but she also is not someone who, just to please everybody or just to live up to their expectations or let them walk all over her. She doesn't do that. It's a beautiful story. It's it's a love story, and it's definitely, if you're going to get into the Bronte sisters. Now, granted, this is the only one I've read, so I guess I can't really say this, but I personally feel like it's an easy read. I mean, it does drag a little bit at some points. When you first read it, you might feel that way, but I feel like, and the pacing can seem a little bit off with this one, but it's still such a great book. And then the last one, I decided to pick another modern, non-classic book, and that is It by Stephen King. One of my favorite Stephen King still. I've read quite a few now of Stephen King, and I've seen a lot of adaptations. But this is still my favorite. This is also, in a way, a coming-of-age story. Because it's about these 7 kids, these 7 people. Half of the story is when they're kids, when they're like preteens, and then the other half is when they're adults. And they live in the town of Derry, Maine. And their town has been haunted by this monster they call It. And this monster takes the form of whatever you are afraid of. And it mostly goes after kids, because kids are easy. Their fears are easy to digest. And its favorite form is a clown. That's hence why you got the whole clown Pennywise. And these kids, who are all outcasts and bullied for one reason or another, they decide they're the ones who end up being able to fight and defeat Pennywise the clown. And like I said, the first part is when they're kids, but then the clown, they just wound the clown. They don't kill him. There's a debate about it, because It is usually has been both adaptations, It has been played by a male, but some people believe but there is an aspect in the story that makes people believe that It is a female originally. Although male seahorses, although there are some animals that they do things that females do, and that that females, for humans at least, females will do those things, but the male doesn't with certain animals. They just wound it, and so it comes back 27 years later, right on schedule, because that's what it's known for. It does a 27-year cycle, and it kind of represents all the hate in the world. I mean, like, considering what's going on, this would be perfect feeding ground for It right now, considering what's going on in the world right now. Although no, a lot of people with what's going on, also, it's making people a little bit nicer to each other, so maybe not. Or there's a little bit of both. I feel like people are being nicer to each other because of what's going on in the world, but then there's also still a lot of hate going on as well. Now, there is one infamous scene that is a bit inappropriate towards the climax of the book. That is, I think it's in the climax. Actually, no, it has to be the climax of the first. It's in the climax of the first part, I believe. That is very inappropriate. It's like, wow. I mean, I cannot believe he included. But then I think Stephen King was high on cocaine at the time when he wrote this book, so there's a lot of psychedelic, weird things in this book. But this one infamous scene, it's so infamous, it's so weird, and like, oh my God, King, you dirty little man, can't believe you put that in there, that they basically will never show it on an adaptation. You will never see that scene on screen. So just a fair warning, it's a bit like weird. It's a bit much. So that's the only problem. And then, of course, it's a really long ass book. But I still love this. It's still one of my favorite Kings. I love stories about coming of age stories about children and, growing up and becoming adults. And there's just something, and it really looks at imagination and friendship, and just your fears, and it's a good book. Okay, so that's question number 4. Question number 5 is your least favorite book. And I just say Catcher in the Rye. I don't know if I have a copy of it still. It might have been one of the ones I already donated to Gibbons Last Roast Office Bookstore. I just did not like it. I read it in high school or middle school, and I liked it then, I think, but I don't like it anymore. When I read it a couple years ago, I did not connect with the main character. I couldn't stand Holden Caulfield. I recently read his other book, his other novel, Franny and Zooey, and I do like that a little bit better, but not much. But yeah, Holden, it's not a lot happens in the book. I do like J.D. Salinger's writing, but I couldn't think of an example, a more recent example of a book that, because even the one book that I didn't read all the way to the end, that I think I made that one the answer for one of the questions on here. I still really enjoyed it. I was still interested in it. It's just I didn't like, there was an aspect towards the climax that I didn't like in that one. But I will talk about that book in a little bit. So Catcher in the Rye, I didn't connect with Holden Caulfield. I was in fact annoyed by him. I did like his relationship with his sister. I thought that was really sweet. But his constantly whining and being like, everyone's such a phony. I don't like people, and I know that and I do understand that he's a teenager, but reading it now, I think it doesn't help that I read it now when I was like in my late 20s at the time when I read it, because like I said, it was a few years ago, and I'm 31 now. But I think that it didn't help that I was an adult that I'm reading, and I just was like frustrated with his character because I personally do not see the world the way he does. But I do think he can be relatable to teenagers. I think a lot of teenagers feel the way Holden feels. And a lot of people that age, we think we know everything. We think we understand everything. But we don't. I feel like there's so much more. We're still so young, and there's so much experience we haven't had that we don't know everything. Even sometimes, even though I was just also thinking about how sometimes there are older people who think they know everything and they understand because they've had so much life experience. But at the same time, I think there are chances when they don't, because we're always learning, and also sometimes and times change, things develop, things grow, technology changes, people change, the world changes. So the way things are, the way people think, the way things were for them back in the day aren't always the same. So just because something doesn't always work the same way, and people don't always think the same way. So I think older people don't always know everything, even if they've had a lot of life experience. But yeah, I couldn't connect. I was very frustrated with Holden's character, and the fact that not a lot happened in Holden. There weren't a lot of characters other than him. Like I said, the one good thing I liked was his sister, and the writing. I liked the writing. Especially him walking around. He skips school and walks around New York for a little while and just talks about how everyone's a phony and he doesn't like life. And I get that he was probably depressed, but I guess I don't want to read necessarily books about people that are, unless there's a lot more going on than them just talking about how much they hate life and how much they think everyone's full of crap. But yeah, that's the best answer I could come up with, because I don't know if there's any books here that I've read this year that I don't like. Okay, so question number 6. Love triangles. I said yes because I get what the point of them is and their appeal, but I get what people complain about them, because sometimes they do get annoying and frustrating, because, and the one thing that bugs me is sometimes if both people on the two corners in the love triangle, the person has to choose from, sometimes they're both really likable, decent people, and I feel guilty for choosing one over the other, and sometimes it's unnecessarily dragging out, but at the same time, it does add some interesting drama, and sometimes dragging out the story is not necessarily a bad thing. Depends on how you look at it. So I'm actually okay with love triangles. I don't hate them as much as some people. Or I should say most people do. Most people hate love triangles. But I'm okay with them. Okay, most recent book you just couldn't finish. And I did count this book as a finish, but I technically didn't. And that is Thomas Hardy's June the Obscure. And this is my first Thomas Hardy, but that doesn't mean I'm going to not read any more Thomas Hardy. And I have been warned that his books can be very depressing and sad. And just there was a part in the beginning of the climax, it's just like, okay, I can't do this. Like, it was a little too personal for me. And I just didn't like it where he went with it. It was just too much. And I did find out a few days ago that someone, I think it was Katie from Books and Things, was talking. I was watching one of her videos where she was recommending Thomas Hardy and where you should start with him, and she did say you should not start with this one. It's just a little too sad. It's a little bit much, and I just couldn't. But like I said, on Goodreads, I did count it as a finished book. I count towards my Goodreads goal, but I didn't like it, so I didn't technically finish the book, but I did read it. And maybe this is not the best example, but it's the one I could come up with at the moment. Okay, so question number 8. That was question number 7. Question number 8 is a book you're currently reading. And I said, although I'm not gonna, I'm taking a break from it for a while, but I am currently reading Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb. I decided once I finish this book, then I can get the second book in the Last Ship Trader series. I have the first in that trilogy and the second book. In the third book. I did not realize I ordered the third book when I ordered on Thrift Books. But I have the first one, so it's all good. But once I get this one done, then I can get the third book, the second book, and then I can get the and I'm also probably when I order that book, I'm probably also gonna get what is it called? The fourth book in the Temeraire series as well. That's probably gonna be part of that order as well. But this is the third book in the Farseer trilogy about young Fitz. And he is in this, he is the bastard son of one of the king-in-waiting, Prince Chivalry. But Chivalry, kind of abandons Fitz. But before he does, he sets up Fitz with the stable master, Burrick. And eventually, though, his grandfather, King Shrew, notices Fitz for the first time and sees potential in him. So he passes him off to be apprenticed to his assassin, Shade. And it's all about Fitz learning how to be an assassin and being part of, but not really being part of the royal family. Because he is still a bastard, so he's not officially a part of the family, but he kind of is at the same time. Because biologically, yes, he is still part of this family, but he's not. But his mom is not, his dad is not married to his mom. And she's not going to be queen. And it's such a heartbreaking story because Fitz goes through so much crap. He doesn't, he is loved, but he doesn't realize it. And he can never have a normal life. And in the first book, he's only a kid. He's a teenager in the second book. In the third book, he's a young adult. And he's so vulnerable and sad, his childhood best friend, he falls in love with her, but he can't be with her, because her life will constantly be in danger, because he's part of all this political drama in his family, and he also has two types of magic. He has the skill magic, which is something members of the Farseer line have, where they can mind meld, kind of, they can communicate with each other and get into each other's heads. And then he also has another magic, which they call the wit, which is basically, it's kind of like doing what you do with the skill, but with animals. The problem is, he is told by Burrick that a lot of people are afraid of the wit because they're worried that you will become more beast than man with the wit magic if you bond too much with animals. And in the first book, he bonds with 2 animals, 2 dogs, and it's just, Fitz goes through so much, and he just gets caught up in all this political drama, you know, when and it's just a lot. He deals with a lot, but he's such a he deserves nothing but the best. You just want to give him a hug and assure him that everything's gonna be okay. But he's also a very frustrating character because he's so young and thinks he understands things. And this third book is all about him realizing that he doesn't know as much as he thinks he does. That he doesn't understand as much as he thought he did. And, he's growing up a lot in this third book. And he's kind of, in the third book, all I'm going to say is he's kind of on his own in the third book. And he's on a revenge quest in this one. And it's really good, really interesting. He's meeting a lot of interesting people in this one. I am on chapter 14 of this one, and like I said, I want to get this one done before the live ship traders. And there's a certain order that is said you should read these books. You should read her Realm of the Elderly series. But yeah, it's such a great book, and it's a great trilogy. It is a very character-driven and very slow-moving story, so if you prefer fast-moving plots, you might not love it as much. And also, the first one is very much in the mind of a child, but it's written, it's like, and it's an adult character, an older character recalling their childhood. And I know for some people that can be a little bit annoying. Okay, so that was question number 8. Question number 9, last book you recommended to someone. So, Larissa is currently reading a lot more, and we were talking about mysteries and stuff. Like, she has been reading, she read Casual Vacancy, and so she was asking me for more mysteries, and so I had suggested, and I don't have this one, but And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. So I think Agatha Christie is definitely worth checking out. She writes good mysteries. She writes a lot of series mysteries. She's, I think, 3 series. But Then There Were None is a standalone. I think it's a really good mystery. It's a very engaging. And then I also recommended Kate Morton's book. She writes standalone novels that they're also mysteries. They're not like detective stories or anything. Like, I think there's a difference between a detective story and a mystery. I think you can have a mystery there's no detective and there's no procedural stuff and there's no one trying to solve a case or anything. There's just someone trying to find out about the past and trying to, like, there's this mysterious, like, Kate Morton writes a lot about, like, there's a mysterious secret that our main character, who's from the modern day of when the book is set, it's usually a woman. I don't think she's ever been, like, where there's a male main lead. And she finds out something about the past. It gets a little tease of the past, and she decides to figure out what happened all those years ago and does research and stuff. And then the reader gets to go into the past. So it's a dual narrative, oftentimes, where she's starting in the present of when she sets the story, and then you go back into the past. But I think those are great mysteries, especially if you're not big into the detective stories. You might like those. So I recommended that to her as well. I recommended Kate Morton's work to her as well. Okay, so next question number 10 is oldest book you've read, and I said Beowulf. This is one I read for the British literature class. I don't know if Beowulf was older than Sir Gawain the Green Knight or not, but I really liked it. It's basically about this guy who fights these monsters, and it was really interesting. Like, it's a bit cliche at times, but I still kind of liked it. There has been a computer generated movie that was made for it, but it was very entertaining. It was entertaining. I mean, I wasn't a big fan of all the characters, but still, although the character Beowulf kind of reminded me a little bit of Thor in the first movie when we first meet his character. Now I think about it, but it's still, it was good. I liked it, and it was written, I don't think this one we know who the author is or not. I think the author was unknown in that one, but it was still really, I liked it. It's not my all-time favorite, but I still, and it's an epic poem, so if you're not an epic poem person, then you might not like it. But I'm definitely getting more into epic poetry, and I'm also getting more into plays and stuff. But yeah, I think that's my oldest. I don't have the book, but like I said, I read it. So okay, so newest book you've read, and I don't know if this is correct either, but this is the closest I can get for this year anyway, is Gods of Jade and Shadow. And I said this because it's still a hardback copy. In the US, the paperbacks come second after the hardbacks. Hardbacks come first. And this is about a young woman, Cassiopeia. Her dad died. Her mom had married her dad was kind of a merchant and everything, and her mom comes from a rich family. So her and her mom, after her dad goes to live with her grandfather, who's kind of a jerk, kind of an asshole to them, and she kind of becomes a Cinderella type figure in this family. And one day, while going to clean her grandfather's room, she opens a magical chest and accidentally releases a Mayan god. And he's on a mission to restore himself physically and restore himself to the throne by getting revenge on his brother. And because Cassiopeia released him, she bound herself to him, to this god. But because of that, so she must accompany him on this mission to get revenge. So they go all over Mexico and everywhere, and Mexico City. And eventually, the problem with this god, because he's bound to Cassiopeia, he becomes very human. The more he's bound to her, and feelings develop between these two. This was a great, very folksy type story. I really loved it. It was very interesting, and the ending kind of surprised me a little bit. I didn't think I would, but it's so good, beautifully written. I like that we were getting a little bit of Mayan mythology. Like the closest I've gone into Mayan mythology is in there's an episode of Supernatural where they deal with a Mayan god. But it was very interesting and intriguing. I would definitely love to read more literature about Mayan mythology. But yeah, so this I don't know how new this book is, but it's close enough. So okay, so next question is favorite author, and again, I just could not choose. So I said quite a few authors. Stephen King, for one. I love Stephen King. He writes, and he doesn't just write horror. He's mostly known for horror, but he writes fantasy, like the Dark Tower series of fantasy. Some of his short stories are more contemporary dramas. But yeah, he is known for a lot of, like, if you haven't read a lot of his books, if you're not familiar with him, you only know him as a horror writer. He has a very crass writing style, though, and he doesn't shy away from certain things, and some of his books, and he's known for not writing good endings, but I still love him. His stories are so gritty and so real, and I like that he doesn't just write horror. Yes, he's known for writing horror, but he also writes fantasy, and he writes, and supernatural stuff, and a little bit of science fiction, and he writes dramas, contemporary dramas about life, like The Body is, in Shawshank Redemption. But yeah, he's such a prolific writer, and just is really good. And there's a reason a lot of people are familiar with his work, and a lot of people can enjoy his work, even if you're not a horror fan. Like I said, he doesn't just write horror. Just unfortunately, a lot of people that are not hardcore fans, or just fans in general, might only know him as a horror author. So I also said Kate Morton, she's the one I recommended. I love her mysteries. Her writing is so beautiful and it's easy to get lost in. Her characters, I think, come off as are very relatable, though I've never had some experiences those characters have. I love her settings that she chooses, and just they're such good, warm and fuzzy stories. They give me warm feelings. I said Brandon Sanderson. He's great at world building. His writing style is not super beautiful or anything. It's nothing really special, but he's still such a good, and he just really gets you into the story. He writes amazing plots, and he's known for really amazing magic systems. And he's just, again, he's so good, and all the stories are different. He writes so much, and he like Stephen King, he gets them out really fast. It's amazing how fast he gets his work written down, and he writes it himself. It's one of the things I don't like about James Patterson. I used to like him, but I heard that he writes so many books that he doesn't even write his own books anymore. And that just kind of bothers me. Okay, and then I also said Charles Dickens. I love Dickens. He's not everybody's cup of tea, and I know his writing style is hard to get into, but he creates such. And some people, think his characters are very cliche and archetype, but I just love how colorful his characters are and how interesting and intriguing his plots are, and they're so all over the place. And there's so much little threads going on in his stories, which can be confusing if you're unfamiliar with his work. And I personally love his writing style. I know, like I said, I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but there's something about his writing. He's another author that I get warm and fuzzy feelings when I read his books. And he really thinks about the little guy, and he's very funny, and like Austen, he is very much critiquing the society that he's part of, and that's what makes his books funny. And he has so many books out there, And then I decided to throw in one more female author that I absolutely love, and that is Robin Hobb, and that's the woman who wrote Assassin's Quest. Yes, it's a woman. And she's like Brandon Sanderson. She has one overarching story plot, but then a bunch of little series within the plot. In her stories, like with King, she's so good with characters, and she's such a great writer. Her stories can be a little slow moving, and like I said, the Far Seer trilogy is not the best. And not a literary masterpiece, but it's still so good and so engaging. And then another thing is I remember years ago reading comments saying, women cannot write that kind of epic, gritty fantasy. They can only write, paranormal and romancy stuff. And I think she proves otherwise, that you can do that a woman can write these really, it may not be super gritty story, but it's still like there's blood and stuff and people dying, and then there's, this kid goes through so much crap. And the stories are so intricate and such an amazing world, the Realm of the Elderlings world, at least of what I've read so far. So I think she proves that a woman can write like that kind of stuff. Just like in the same thing with Juliet Marillier. I was trying to limit myself on how many authors I would put on here, but I should do an author video of favorite authors. I don't know if I've already done one once before. But I should definitely do one if I haven't, or at least do an update version if I have done one. Okay, question number 13 is buying books or borrowing books, and in all honesty, I like spending my money on books. I like having books where I can take my time and I don't have to get to them right away, especially and I feel like I can never borrow a big chunky book. I mean, I still have my brother-in-law's John Adams by David McCullough book. I still have not gotten to it because I'm not in the mood. I mean, I keep thinking about giving it back to it, but the one time I left it for him to take, he didn't see it, so I still have it, and right now I cannot go see them. We can't go visit them, but like with Stephen King, I could never get Stephen King from the library unless it's one of his short story collections, which I have gotten his short story collections from the library, or novellas. But I'm not a fast reader, which is not a bad thing. I mean, it's a good thing I'm not a fast reader, but at the same time, like, this is why I can't get books. We only got 2 weeks. There are some libraries that do 3 weeks, but we only have 2, which I don't know why. But then again, Libby app you only get 1 week with a book, and I feel like I'm rushing it. I will rush the book and speed it up because I don't drive. So I'm not, and then when I go to work, it's not like I work in an office where I can discreetly listen to an audiobook, and hide the fact that I'm listening to it. I work at a grocery store, so I cannot do that. The only time I can listen to it is possibly during my break. And even then, like, there might be people in there watching TV or, just hanging out in there, and that would be rude and bothersome for them. So yeah, it's kind of annoying that with the Libby app I only get a week with a book. So I will borrow them, and I appreciate the fact that we have a library. I've definitely been using the library a lot more because there are some books I'm somewhat interested in that I don't want to spend the money on them, but I would like to check them out anyway. But I like to keep them. I like to buy them so I can keep them forever and take my time with the book, and I don't have to rush it. I can read it when I want to read it. And, I don't, as I've said a million times before, I don't like the pressure of knowing that, okay, eventually I'm going to have to return this book. But, again, I appreciate the existence that we have libraries, and I do use it. Especially because where we live now, I can actually walk to the library. But I kind of like to buy them. Okay, so next is... Okay, so I had trouble with this one, but question number 14. A book you dislike that everyone else seems to love. At first I thought it said a book that you like that everyone seems to dislike. But no, it's actually a book that you dislike that everybody loves. So I went ahead and said His Dark Materials, which is funny because I liked the show on HBO. I enjoyed the first season. But just, it got weird in books 2 and 3. Then, I liked the world was engaging and interesting, but there were aspects of the book that got weird. And I think I don't hate the book or the trilogy. It's just, it's not my all-time favorite. And a lot of people just love Philip Pullman's work. And a lot of people grew up reading those books. And I just, after a while, it went in a kind of direction that was a little weird in my opinion. And a little inappropriate. And I think it was good. I just don't think it was the best fantasy ever, But it wasn't terrible either. I just not a big fan. Okay, so next question number 15. Bookmarks or dog ears? Bookmarks. For the longest time, I was against the idea of dog earing. It's okay. So my relationship with the concept of dog earing is I dog eared when I was a kid. Then I stopped and decided to use bookmarks. And I go, well, why should you dog ear when you can just use something to mark the page, like a receipt even, or a napkin or something, as long as it's not dirty. But then I got back into the habit of dog earing recently. Not dog earing, I still always use bookmarks, but I will dog ear if it's a long book. Then I will dog ear where I want to read up to. But that's about it. That's as much as I'll dog ear. I don't think if you dog ear and you don't like using bookmarks, or you just have dog ear books, then you do you. I don't think it's a crime to dog ear a book. I think it's a little ridiculous because granted, I will when I'm reading a textbook in class, I will, if the pages are a little folded in the corner, then I will fix it or whatever. But I'm not gonna get mad at you or be like, how dare you if you dog ear a book. It's like, if you want to dog ear a book, that's cool. It's you're still marking where you left off anyway. As long as you're not ripping or staining the book, which you're not when you're dog earing. You're just folding the corner over so that you can mark where you left off. Okay, so now I'm on question number 16, a book you can always reread, and I went ahead and said Jane Eyre by by Charlotte Bronte, because I've read it 3 times now, and I just love this book. And I always get something, so far the 3 times I've read, I've gotten something new out of it. Like, my feelings about Rochester have evolved. I think he's an engaging character, very interesting, but he's also, a very frustrating character, and a character that I think is not relationship goals. And I love Jane even more. I think each time I read this, I've related in a different way to the book. Like, the first time I was 16, I think, when I read it, and then I read it when I was, and there's not much of an age gap between when I read it the second time and then when I read it this year, because it wasn't that long ago that I read it for a second time. It was only a few years ago. And my feelings were very similar, but they hadn't completely, to the point where I was like, oh, I don't want to read Why Sargasso Sea, which is kind of a spin-off to Jane Eyre, like a retelling / spin-off, because it's about the Mad Woman in the Attic. And plus, I just love the idea of having this new edition. I love this edition, the colors and everything. But I feel like my feelings on rereads are you can get something new out of it every time you reread the book. But I do get the idea of, sometimes some books, it's like, what's the point of rereading them? Like, a lot of detective stories or murder mysteries and stuff, once you know what happens, unless you just absolutely fall in love with the story, there's no point in reading it. That's why I don't keep Agatha Christie books. Because, I bought them for cheap, or I got them from the library, and then I return them or donate them again back to the bookstore, because it's like, I know the story now, I don't need to reread it again. But this one I definitely can reread, and it's not the only one. I've also can reread The Great Gatsby too. I love that one, and eventually I would like to reread The Secret History as well. Actually, and Crime and Punishment too. All these, the ones I showed you. And I am currently, as you saw, I have a bookmark in it, because I'm currently rereading it. And whenever I talk about these, and books I want to reread, or I need to read, all of a sudden I'm thinking, oh, I want to do it, like, right that second. But actually, when I'm done filming this, I'm probably going to need to eat lunch or something before it gets too late. But anyway, so, yeah. So I said, because I've already reread Jane Eyre 3 times. So I said that one. And I also want to reread North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell, but I don't have the book because I made the mistake of donating it, thinking, I like it, I enjoy it, but I'm not going to reread it. The problem is now I have Wives and Daughters by Gaskell, so it's like, I feel like I should read that one, and unfortunately I loaned my copy of the miniseries to my aunt who lives in South Carolina, and, I have not gotten it back for her, and as you guys know, we can't really travel to other states. Or we at least gotta be really careful about it. Okay, so next is question number 17. Can you read while hearing music? No, I can't. I tried to, and I can't. I even have tried to, while I have the TV on, but I'm not completely taking in the story. And I don't know if I could do the whole music that's just instrumental with no words, no lyrics. I don't know if I could do that. And then, sometimes I will play vlogs, because there are times when the person doing the vlog is not talking, and you just see them doing, like, reading or preparing a meal or something, or taking a walk. So I feel like I can read a little bit then, because their voices, I'm not hearing them talk, so it's not distracting me. Although I feel guilty, because it's like, I clicked on the vlog to watch it, and I'm not entirely watching it. But sometimes where I'm into a book, and I want to read that book, and I want to keep going with that book, or, like, finish the chapter or whatever, or, like, but yeah, I can't do music in the background. I tried it when I did. I don't think I can. It's just too distracting. Like I said, maybe the instrumental music. I haven't tried it. But okay. Question number 18. One POV or multiple POVs? Which, in case you don't know, POV is point of view. And I like multiple POVs. I mean, there are a lot of stories where I want to get the perspective of another character, like Jane Eyre. I love to get Rochester's perspective. In Harry Potter, I would love to get Ron or Hermione's perspective. Sorry, I probably shouldn't be scratching my nose, but to be fair, I've been to the bathroom a couple times and I washed my hands. So it's so funny when I can't scratch, when I probably shouldn't be scratching my nose, because you can't. It's not a good idea to touch your face unless you know. Of course it itches, and when you can't touch your face. Where was I? Okay, so multiple POVs or one POV, and like a lot of YA books. Sorry, again, it's itchy. Fingers, it itches when you're not technically supposed to be, touching your face. It's even worse when I have to wear a mask, especially like those throwaway masks that like the ones that I know we have those in case someone forgot their mask, because there are people that will forget, and we offer them in case someone did forget, and those the material can be a little, the threads from the material can irritate your face, but there are a lot of books that, especially a lot of YA authors, and I get why they do, because they want you to stay in the head of that particular teenager. Like, that's the reason when I liked Twilight, I had wanted to get Edward's perspective on the whole situation, but now I moved on from Twilight, and I've heard a lot of not so great things about it, which I'm not surprised, because Edward is a stalker. He's very controlling and possessive of Bella, and the whole vampire thing is not an excuse, okay, for him to be the way he is. Don't use that as an excuse. So I don't even want to read from his perspective, but at the time, I wanted to read from his perspective, because I feel like sometimes in the story, whether it's I did this and I did that, or you're just inside that character's head the whole time, but it's not necessarily in first person, but you're still in the one character's head. Like, I don't think Cassandra Clare's books are in first person, but we are still only in one character's head the whole time, and I feel like it's so limiting, because there are things that might happen when the character's not around. That character's not there. Like, the Magnus and Alec relationship in The Mortal Instruments, Clarity's not always going to be around them. And no, it's not in first person, I don't think. Or Harry Potter's not in first person, but it's still, we're only inside Harry's head. We're only seeing things through his eyes. And I get that, because, like, especially in young adult books, for teenagers, sometimes they need that. They need that so they can connect. And they can feel like they can relate to the character. I mean, that's the same reason authors will end up making the main character bland, because anyone can see themselves as the main character. Like Bella, for instance, I feel like she's a little bit of a bland character. And I get why they do it, but at the same time, it's like there are so many more interesting characters, because sometimes the main characters, especially in young adult books, are not as interesting, and main characters are more interesting. So, like, I love it when you get multi-perspective, like the Song of Ice and Fire series. That is so great, because you get to see all these, especially since there's so much going on and so many different characters and problems. It's not just the Starks or the Lannisters. It's not just about them. It's about all the families in Westeros and all the lives, like even the non-royal, non-noble characters. So I personally feel like I would rather have multi-perspective, especially if there's a lot of interesting characters. Okay, so question number 19, almost done. 2 more questions, although I'm not going to do question 20. Question 20 is tagging people, and I don't like doing that because I feel weird for some. I don't know if they'll ever get the tag, or if they'll ever come across it and see, and know that I tag them, or if, like I said, I feel like, are they, sometimes I feel a little weird about tagging people, also because I'm assuming that you'll be interested in the tag, and a lot of people, I still feel like I don't know a lot of the booktubers on here. I feel like I don't, So I feel, even if I watch their videos a lot, I feel a little presumptuous in tagging people. But if you guys want to do this tag, it's a kind of a fun thing, and it's not just, it's a fun questionnaire. So, question number 19, do you read a book in one sitting or over multiple days? It depends on the book. There are some books that I have, if they're short enough, I feel like I could. Potentially I could read, like, The Great Gatsby in one sitting, but I also don't always like to, because I like to take my time with books. And if it's a book, like, I was recently reading, this book, Franny and Zooey, and maybe I could have read this in only one sitting, I don't know, but it was just, I was reading it because I was somewhat interested, and it was my sister's book, and I borrowed it from her, and I was kind of inspired to be like, okay, I haven't read the books that I borrowed from her, so maybe I should get around to reading some of them. And so I finally decided to read, so when we're finally able to travel and go see each other, I will be able to give this one back to her. And then sometime in September, I'm going to read Brave New World, which is also her book, so I can give that back to her. And there's also a series. I don't know if if the series is on a channel that a streaming network that I can watch, because I think it's on a streaming network. But I don't know if I'll be able to get access to it, but I do want to reread. I've been meaning to reread it, but that's also her book. But yeah, it's a book that I was kind of interested in, but I didn't like it. And so if it's a book that I'm kind of interested in, but I'm not really liking it, but I don't want to DNF it, because it's really not that long, I can't read it in one sitting. I need to take breaks in between. And of course, I can't read a really long book in one sitting. I just can't. I like watching TV. I like getting on the internet and go watching booktube videos. So sue me. I do other stuff. I watch TV and stuff and watch movies. So yeah, I just can't. I mean, I have tried to, and maybe there are some books I can, and I have thought about doing a 24-hour reading sprint, but I can't. There's too many distractions, and I get restless. I'm definitely one of those people who has to get up and do other stuff or change my reading position, because I get, like, just sitting here right now, my butt is hurting, and I'm not even reading. I'm not in the most comfortable, but of course, that's probably because my dog, and the rascal boy, you can't see him, but he's here, so I can't really lean back or anything. So, like I said, I'm not going to do question 20 that involves tagging people. So if you want to do this tag, it's a fun tag. It's a little different, and I'm wondering if it's true that some people that were doing this tag were saying that they feel like tags are coming back. So I'm wondering if that is the case. Because I think tags are fun, I mean, and I think you can make your answers more interesting if you know how to elaborate on your answers. And I feel like now people are more into the idea of longer videos. I mean, so far none of you guys have complained about me rambling, or getting off topic. I mean, but anyway, like I said, if you guys are interested, feel free to do this tag. Like I said, it's a fun tag. So if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Click subscribe if you haven't. I hope you are doing well, and I will talk to you all later. Alright, bye!